Sejam bem-vindos e bem-vindas à 16ª Cineop, Mostra de Cinema de Ouro Preto, o evento da preservação, história e educação, o evento que trata cinema como patrimônio. Aqui o território é da diversidade, das imagens e espaços que nos representam, que constroem identidades, novas formas de criação e conexões. Você vai assistir agora a Masterclass com o tema Estratégias para o Digital no FILMMUSEUM e na Fiaf. É com prazer que recebemos nossa convidada, Anne Gett. Anne é chefe de conservação de filmes e acesso digital no FILMMUSEUM em Amsterdã, nos Países Baixos. Sua equipe se concentra na restauração e preservação de filmes de forma analógica e digital, acesso digital e venda de arquivos. Ela é também chefe da Comissão Técnica da Fiaf, Federação Internacional de Arquivos Fílmicos. A Comissão Técnica publicou recentemente a Declaração Digital 3 sobre ética na restauração de filmes e está trabalhando em ferramentas e consultoria para novas instituições e instituições com recursos limitados. Anne tem mestrado em Preservation and Presentation of the Moving Image pela Universidade de Amsterdã e já trabalhou em Nova York para Women Make Movies e várias empresas de tecnologia e museus. Eu sou Inês Azengart Menezes, co-curadora da temática Preservação da 16ª Cineop e vou mediar esse encontro. Anne, thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to host you at Cineop, finally.
Thanks, Inez. Thanks for the nice introduction. Shall I just get started? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Whatever you want.
Okay. Then I greet everyone. Thank you very much for letting me join you. Welcome and greetings from Amsterdam. As you can see, we're not at FILMMUSEUM. We're at my home, and perhaps you're at your home as well. So thank you for letting me sit with you today. Also, thank you to the translators who will be translating this. I appreciate your work, and I will try to speak slowly. I'd like to start a PowerPoint so that you have some nice pictures to look at while I'm talking. And I'm going to give you a short introduction, as Ines said, to the FILMMUSEUM, to our collection activities, and also to the Fiaf Technical Commission. Here's the I building in Amsterdam. The first picture is still the one we do. Yes. This has started to be a recognized icon in the city. It is an architectural building that's very important for Amsterdam now, along with, of course, bridges, windmills, museums. In terms of tourism, if you're a film person, this may be something that you come to visit on your very first day in Amsterdam. But more and more, it's also become something for other tourists to come visit, perhaps on their 5th or 6th day in the city. It's on the other side of Amsterdam from the main part of the city, so it has a beautiful ferry ride across the water, and it's certainly a must-see destination. Next slide, please. The origins of the FILMMUSEUM are since 1946. It has existed as an archive. So this year, we're happy to celebrate 75 years as an archive. And that means that there will be lots of activities online to celebrate, which you will also be able to be invited to. For many years, perhaps some of you have visited, it was in this pavilion in the Vondelpark. And this is still a beautiful pavilion that you can go visit if you come to town. Next slide, please. This is the picture of our new building, which you saw before, from the inside as it was being built. We started here, we started being in this building in 2012, but FILMMUSEUM was founded in 2010. And it was a merger between 4 different institutions, which then meant that we had to do a major rebranding, you could say, to combine all these institutions into one. Perhaps it's relevant for this audience to say that our budget Our funding for iFilmMuseum is about 50% government funding and 50% from other sources of income, and that includes important sponsorships, also donations, and also income from tickets and event sales and rentals of the building for parties. During the pandemic, we have been closed a couple of times, and we've been grateful to the Dutch government for stepping in to cover a percentage of the lost income and a percentage of the salaries during that time. Next slide, please. So since April 2012, if you do come to visit us, or if you have come, you would have come to this futuristic looking building. And it's on the banks of this water, which is called IJ, which in Dutch you say I, a little bit like I. So that's a nice joke on the name. Next slide, please. So instead of playing you a sort of sizzle reel, here's a picture of sort of the feeling of the building. We have a lot of premieres there, a lot of guests come, openings, late night parties, sitting on the terrace. It has a lot of energy, and we really hope we can get back to that soon. Next week we will open, I'm recording this in June. Next week we will open the building partially again, and by late summer we really hope we can get back to this sort of bright energy that the building has. Next slide, please. Inside the building we have 4 cinemas with 620 seats. We have a very large exhibition space, a workshop for education, a restaurant, offices, a permanent exhibition space for that has pre-cinema objects and private viewing areas to play back films for yourself or with your friends. Next slide, please. And this is the main arena, the main foyer that you enter as you come into the building. So this is a little bit like a ship inside. It's wooden and it looks out on the water. It's a great place to meet friends before you go into the cinema or just to hang out. Next slide, please. I wanted to point out that we have exhibitions, this very large exhibition space, and we do 4 different exhibitions a year. Some of them are from our collection material, like the middle one, John Desmet's Dream Factory, it was silent films, William Kentridge, Fellini. We sometimes have traveling exhibitions, and sometimes we have exhibitions that were custom made for us. Right now, we have a exhibition called Vive le Cinema, 5 contemporary artists reflecting on cinema, and that's also viewable online. And there's a link that I'll provide you later if you'd like to see what's happening in the building now. Next slide, please. And we also have this permanent exhibition of pre-cinema and apparatus and interactive exhibits, especially nice with kids and families. A green screen that children can try, a make your own flip book, and some private cabins that you can see in the back, those yellow objects in the back of the second photo, where people can come and sit and view films from our collection. Next slide, please. So that was an introduction to the museum building. Now I want to quickly move you to the collection center, which is where I work. This building is about 15 minutes from the museum building, and it's actually just a very, very large black box that's mostly used for storage, for film cans and other material. And here we have room for about 31 staff members. We have a nitrate viewing area. We have digitization and restoration. We have our vaults, a small screening room, as you see here. And I listed the vaults on the screen for those who are interested. We have one that's very, very cold, 5 degrees, and 4 that are +5, and 3 that are 18, so warm vaults for paper storage or stills or other material. The building holds approximately 210,000 cans of films. That's our safety collection. And we also have a digital storage that holds about 2.5 petabytes right now, but it could be expanded. Okay, next slide, please. So what do we do in this building? Well, we have our shipping and receiving of films, and we do investigation and research. We also prepare films for photochemical preservation, which is then done at a lab. So as you see on the screen, our photochemical preservation is done at Hagafilm Digital, which is in the Netherlands mostly. We do have our own scanner, so we're able to scan at 2K or 4K on a Scanity that we have. We also do digital restoration either in-house with a Diamant software or at Hagafilm. We work on both national and international cinema. We have a collection of both. Next slide, please. This is a little peek into our receiving area. This is a big room where we keep all our films when they first arrive, before they've been thoroughly registered or thoroughly investigated. Next slide, please. And then this is one of the vaults where the films come to rest when they are cataloged and registered. And every film has a barcode on it, which connects it to a particular spot on the shelf. Next slide. Next slide, please. This is our, thank you, this is our Scanity scanner. And as I said before, we have a 2K and a 4K license. We scan negatives 4K if we're going to do a photochemical restoration on them, digital restoration on them. And 2K is usually what we use for an access scan. We scan about 150 to 200 films a year in various qualities. And then we decide whether we want to use it. We decide how we're going to scan it based on what we're going to do with it, if it's for access or an intensive restoration. Next slide, please. This is the previous slide, please. This is a sort of to explain the relative size of our collection. We have about 50,000 analog titles with multiple copies. About 17% of them have been digitized or have a digital element. And then on the side, this little square on the side is a quick growing collection because this is born digital material. So these are films that have come into the collection since 2010. And they're only exist in digital form. They don't have an analog element. It's off to the side because it's quite different, but it's growing very quickly, this digital part. Next slide, please. And that brings us to, as I just said, our Born Digital collection, which consists mostly of new releases. It's films that have, for the most part, received a subsidy from the Dutch film funds. And those films are required to give us a digital master in order to receive their final payment or a portion of their payment. So in this way, we receive about 125 films a year, both shorts and feature films. And these are just some sample posters to give you something to look at, but also so you can see the type of films that we get. Next slide, please. It's a lot of work to receive these films, but we're very happy with this arrangement because we were able to set out pretty strict guidelines for the deliveries. And it means that we're building a really healthy contemporary Dutch collection. Next slide, please. I just picked some posters to show you the sort of range. Next slide, please. Yeah, it's a range of films that got Dutch funding. Next slide, please. All these materials that are digital end up in our tape robot, and they're stored on LTO6 or LTO7, LTFS. Next slide, please. I also just wanted to switch back to analog film for a moment to tell you that we also have nitrate vaults. These are outside of any town for the most part, and some of them are old military bunkers. The nitrate, of course, has to be stored outside of the city, and this is becoming a challenge for us in the Netherlands because we have not a lot of wilderness or space that's not inhabited by people. So we are now looking for a new place to build a nitrate vault because the cities have grown closer and closer to these vaults that we have. Next slide. This is a little bit nice because this is happening just today. Every year we have a nitrate inspection day, week actually, where my colleagues go to the bunkers and check all the nitrate cans in a particular bunker each year to make sure that the condition is okay. And as you can see, the one on the bottom left is clearly not okay, but that is not representative of most of our collection. We have a lot of well taken care of nitrate as well. Next slide, please. So how can you, previous slide, yeah. How can you see our material? One way is that we have a big YouTube channel with about 3,500 films on it right now, I believe. We also post things on Facebook. We have a Facebook channel. But if you came to you could also browse this. This is the front end of our digital asset manager, which is called ID. And right now it has about 19,000 playable renditions on it, and along with many other assets. So that's sort of the front end of our digital asset catalog, not our regular catalog. Next slide, please. This is also something that you can see from anywhere in the world. This is called the iFilm player, and it's our video on demand player. It has a lot of free content as well. And I'll put links to these in this slide presentation. Next slide, please. I just wanted to point this out as well. I send films all over the world, and we promote Dutch films as well. We have a whole department that's devoted to promoting Dutch films externally. This is a particular project that we just finished during the pandemic, which makes it a milestone, called The Brilliant Biograph, which was a restoration project of 50 68 millimeter films. There's a very large format film that were over 120 years old. And we scanned them with our partners at Hagefilm in the Netherlands and Cineric in New York at 8K, and then created DCPs of them, which were shown many, many places this last year. And this is a picture of people in Shanghai at a screening, which is nice to see in the middle of the pandemic, that even though we're not moving around, our films are able to move around. It was very nice to imagine someone was going to the cinema somewhere. Next slide, please. And just to kind of give you a human view, this is part of my team. And we were on the day that we had finally ingested 1 petabyte of data into our storage. So we were super happy. And that was 2 summers ago. I think it's nice to see who's working in a place. So that kind of closes the section on a little bit of an introduction to what we're doing at Now I was also asked to speak to you a little bit about FIAF. So I'll quickly do that. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. So I'm also the head of the Technical Commission of FIAF. And I'll just tell you briefly about some of the projects that we're working on. Next slide, please. The FIAF is the International Federation of Film Archives, as Ines said. Currently, it has 92 members and 79 associates in 75 countries. So it has a very, very wide mandate, very wide range of people and types of archives that are involved. And in that, it has 3 commissions: the Technical Commission, which is the one that I'm coordinating, a Cataloging and Documentation Commission, which always has great information about how to catalog, guidelines, documentations, programming and access, a lot of policies and protocols, and also encourages the free exchange of prints between archives. Next slide, please. One of the major projects that we are working on in the Technical Commission is the digital statement. And this has been going on for a few years. We have completed the first statement, which is choosing material for digitization and about scanners. The second statement is preservation scans, and it's a very technically dense document. So It's taking a little while, but it should be done by the end of the year. We just published The Ethics of Restoration, which I think is especially interesting right now when there's so much coming out, so many tools and software coming out that is using machine learning and AI to enhance or recolor or deflicker old films. And so we thought it was really important that that we as archivists had a little bit of a set of possible guidelines to think about how you should represent your analog film in a digital format. The Ethics of Restoration is a very interesting document. I recommend it to you all. We're going to do something on sound scanning and sound restoration because there isn't very much that we found published on that for the FIAF community. And in 2019, we did our first survey of current digital practices in FIAF archives that we will probably rerun in about 5 or 6 years to get a new snapshot of the community. Next slide, please. This is the FIAF website, and this is where you can find the digital statement. That's what it looks like. Next slide. The next slide is that digital statement was kindly translated into Portuguese by the National Archive. So it should be possible to get a copy of that. Next slide. This is part 3, the one I was recommending. I think it's quite interesting to read. And it's also on the website. You can find it at the FIAF website. Next slide, please. And this is a snapshot of the front of the website, and you can see the digital statement part 5 is a PDF, and it's located on the front page of the website. Next slide, please. The other project that we're working on right now is called Minimal Archiving or Basic Archiving, and this is going to be available in probably 2022. And it's an information toolkit. Essentially, it's going to be information with links and instructions on a really simple vault design, some resources for easy to build reference scanners, not preservation scanners, but a reference scanner, and some templates, some simple templates to use for identifying and registering film, and some other useful documentation. So I think that the technical commission is kind of working on 2 levels. We publish some things that are about best practices or the most advanced technical practices, but we also want to address the question of what to do when you are just starting out, or what to do when you don't have a lot of funds or need to respond quickly to a collection that's at risk. And this second project, Minimal Archiving, is more in that direction. Next slide. These are some of the links. Now it's here because it's in the broadcast, to some of the things that I discussed, so you can find it back. And I believe that's the last slide I have, so maybe we can go back to Ines. Thank you.
And thank you.
Sure.
It was such a nice presentation of both FILMMUSEUM and the Technical Commission. So I wonder if we could have a little talk about some of the issues. At first, congrats to the FILMMUSEUM and of course to FILMMUSEUM, because since it was one of the institutions that was merged into FILMMUSEUM. And then I realized Cinemateca Brasileira is also completing 75 years this year. We cannot celebrate as you can, but it's I didn't know we had this coincidence, the same founding year.
Maybe there's something we can we can do about that. That's interesting. That's also exactly the same year. That's really incredible.
Yes,
something to point out, right?
Yeah, I'm curious to hear about the celebrations. What were you intending for this anniversary?
Oh well, it's going to be launched over the entire year. So we have a whole bunch of different things happening. Some of the things were quite in-person celebrations, various important dignitaries coming to the building. But now we're going to do quite a lot of things online. So we've really pivoted to doing a lot of edits of special programs that will be released over the course of the year. I know it's already June, but we've postponed it quite a bit because of the pandemic. So I think now they're going to start being released. Each of the curators has created a special program, and yeah, it'll be nice. There's quite a few things.
Super. You just mentioned each of the curators, and I think it's a quite interesting format. You have several curators on the collection, and the outcome, it's pretty amazing because you can see so many projects from each type of collection in a way. Could you please tell us a little bit more?
Yes, we have a curator, for instance, for silent film. So that's all the old silent films. We have an experimental film curator and an expanded cinema curator. Dutch sort of small films and Dutch small movies. A curator of animation, which I think is a really special collection. We were able to we absorbed a wonderful animation collection a few years ago, and now have a curator of animation. Dutch film, of course, is a major one. So each one of those curators handles their own collection, and then of course they all overlap. So I think that that in the future those may also shift more and more, as you see. There's this whole digital collection that each person is now handling more and more digital material. For instance, things like company films, animation films, experimental films, expanded cinema, all also connect to each other quite a bit. Yeah.
Oh, I think it's quite nice to see how this actually happens, and you can see nice exhibitions and programs, and you can actually see the outcome of this hard work of each curator. It's a quite nice model, and it's. While you were talking, I was thinking we have a bit of a challenging time, like a crisis in the whole audiovisual heritage field, but also our country is facing that. And it's good to see a very solid institution with nice practice. And when you show the numbers of your vaults, for instance, and what it's something that we can see as a goal, and it's quite nice as a. I think it's relevant to see what resources can do, and it's so good to see a human face of this whole work. And I thank you for sharing that. And also, you mentioned that you have half of your funding come from the Dutch government and half from other sources, and the pandemic affected this other part, and then you had the Dutch government stepping in to cover that. And it's something that we can see in many countries that had like a nice presence of the government to deal with the effects of the pandemic. Could you please talk a little bit more about this, because I think it's quite relevant at this time?
Sure. Yeah, and I actually put that in fact, because I thought it would be something that the audience there would find interesting. Is how do you bridge this gap during a pandemic? Of course, we are not at the end of it yet, so we don't really know what the final numbers are, so to speak. But of course, we had less costs in an odd way because the whole building was shut down, the whole museum building. So so there were some things that just didn't cost any money during the year. But the government, it wasn't just for us, it was a national funding scheme to cover costs for all kinds of different things, not just cultural events, lost income during the pandemic. We are lucky, though, that over time we've shifted from a model of having 100% funding from the government to kind of being forced to find other revenue streams. And that's, now we have an entire development team at I that works on partnerships with corporate partnerships. And we have an entire department that works on parties and events and creates options for people to rent out parts of I and have beautiful parties. And of course, it doesn't hurt that we have this incredible building on the water. I showed that picture of a wedding, I think it was, or some sort of corporate event, because I think that's really, for a lot of cultural institutions, that's quite a big part of how they can get some money back in. Of course, this last year we lost all the money that we would have had in the bar and restaurant, in people coming to the cinemas. But that's not, of course, the most important thing. We lost the soul and the love of cinema. We lost all this great energy, and all these people missed out on their premieres, and all these people didn't come to the cinema. So everyone's really looking forward to getting that back. And I think I plays a big role in the city and in the region to kind of create that energy and love around cinema. People really come there as an event, as something to do in the evening. So it's really important that it gets back. Your other question about sort of us, I as a representative archive for other people to see the sort of operating levels. I think it's true, and I think when I talk to other archives, certainly in Europe, we're just in the middle at this point. There's very much the amount of scanner. We only have one scanner. There are quite a few archives that have a lot of scanners. We, in terms of the size of the collection, we're sort of solidly in the middle. A lot of collections are way, way bigger, and so it's sort of a manageably large collection, I could say. That said, we are always understaffed. Even so, there are always more films coming in than we have room for, or that we have time for, which is one of the most amazing things, is that, of course, taking care of films and really investigating them and researching them well and registering them well takes a ton of time. And we get a lot of other things too. I think most archives right now are being offered a lot of videotape and DVD collections, a lot of library collections, and we love all those things, and we love our filmmakers and everyone that wishes to donate things. Sort of a funny side effect of the pandemic was that people were cleaning out their own collections, their own homes, and going through their own personal histories, and that did come into I. We found people were contacting us with their unusual collections, which was a delight. But also, to be honest, most archives don't have the capacity to register all those things. So us too fell into that category. But yeah, I think that we're fairly well managed. The big challenge now that we're trying to do, as I mentioned, was to create a new nitrate vault somewhere in the country that's far enough away from humans to be in a place that can be licensed to have a nitrate vault. So that's our next exciting project.
I think it's funny to hear that you are understaffed. I think this term has another meaning in Brazil, yeah, for sure.
Yes.
But I would like to ask you about programs that you create to welcome external people to the archive to work. For instance, the University of Amsterdam, the master program you did that welcomes students for internships and other programs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have a really close connection with the University of Amsterdam. There's a program called the Preservation and Presentation of the Moving Image, and it takes about 16 master's students a year. And as part of that program, each student has to have an internship in some some audiovisual institution. And so we, of course, because we're in the same town, take quite a few interns every year from that program. So that allows them to have an intensive 5-month focused work time with us. It also helps us develop some of the people that we eventually hire. That's really nice. What's pretty exciting and just launched yesterday, so it will be online. When is this actually airing? Where it's going to be out? It's going to be done already, perhaps. But every year we have 2 traineeship possibilities for recent graduates, and this is a funded program that allows 2 people. It kind of bridges the gap between a university degree or some sort of academic study about audiovisual preservation and working in a functional practical lab or something like that. There's a little bit of a gap between that, and so we've created this traineeship program that's an entire year of paid training with us and with Haga Film usually, or some other lab, to kind of smooth that transition and to help people learn how to transfer theoretical academic archival information into everyday practice. That's really exciting. And so we are going to welcome two people in that for the next 3 years.
Oh, congratulations.
And we also take interns. We also take interns and volunteers all the time from as many cultural institutions do. We rely a lot on volunteers and interns to make everything move smoothly. Certainly at the museum building, a lot of the people are volunteers, and we're really grateful for them.
And as a result, I believe you have a very diverse team. Also because you have maybe many foreigners, and you have also FILMMUSEUM has some diversity policies to build up a team that reflects the Dutch population in a way. And if you'd like to comment that, or I can skip.
No, yes, that's true. I think that like many places where that's a developing conversation. And we can all do better than we have been doing, but we are trying to do that. And it's true that of course, if you can have these wider pools to bring people in at different training levels, that really helps. Certainly, sort of obscure training like film restoration means that you have to look all over the world because there aren't so many film restorers living in Amsterdam, for instance. Yeah, that's true.
Super. I remember one program, like a scholarship, also this connection with the university, that you welcome someone in their PhD to actually come up with a project from your collection itself. And I think this is quite remarkable. I'm not sure if you still have this project going on.
We often work with PhD students. Certainly, we often work with researchers. We also have 2 programs that maybe what you're referring to is an artist in residence and a scholar in residence program, which are more kind of open-ended, that allow people to come in and research in the collection and then come up with something. And it's guided, but it's really an option for us to get somebody to look at everything from a totally different point of view. So we welcome a new view coming in, and that's one of the ways to get it. Yeah, it's an interest. Every archive has a lot of undiscovered corners, and it's always good to have somebody else come in and look at your collection and recategorize it or look at it again. we're going to try to do that more and more to get different views into the collection and to add it to the catalog as well.
Yeah, and it's a very healthy relationship between university and the archive. It's something that we always discussed here in Brazil, but we are not able to celebrate such a partnership yet. But it's something that it's good to stress on as a way to inspire us, I believe. I would like to discuss a little bit more about the, you mentioned pretty strict guidelines to archive, to receive digital board materials. You don't have like a legal deposit mechanism, but you have arrangement with the Netherlands Film Funds. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about this, and also on, we know that digital always changed, and how do you manage to keep up with new practice in production in the market itself? Thanks.
Yes, we were lucky to be able to come to some agreement with the film funds to deliver digital packages to us. And the way it works is that the film funds gives the money to the filmmaker, and in order for the filmmaker to get their last portion of their payment, they have to deliver to us a digital master of their film, and then we agree that it's full or that it's complete, and then they can get their last payment. So it's not legal deposit. Some filmmakers, very few, may decide that's not worth their time, and they won't give us the last, they won't give us the digital master, but for the most part it works. So we get about 130 films a year, 125, 140. Interestingly, this last year, even during the pandemic, it's almost up to that amount. We thought there might be a huge drop, but I think people were continuing to finish their films, perhaps at home, perhaps in small studios. We're curious to see if this next year, because people weren't shooting, there'll be much less sent to us. But pretty early on, we were able to establish that we could request a DCDM from larger film productions with a DCP, with a playable file. Smaller productions that aren't going to that level of quality could send us a ProRes or a very large playable file and a DCP. Some very small sort of independent films or shorts, we negotiate with them to find the best quality that they have. And yeah, so we have strict guidelines in that we won't agree to release that final fund until we see that we have something really good that's stored. And over time, I think it's become a nice understanding with the post-production houses that we are going to take, for the long term, take care of their film in the very best quality. And it's a bonus to be able to give us a copy that we will be sure that it's taken care of. So it's become a nice understanding, I think, for most people, and that's really good. The question about new files is just an ongoing question. As an archive, you're always chasing the developments. We don't dictate the developments. And at the same time, of course, as an archive, you have to be able to accept every single historical file as well. So although with these film fund films, they were shot in the year 2021 and we're receiving them in the year 2021 or 2022, they're at kind of the peak or slightly below whatever the technical peak is right now. But some filmmakers might come to us with their entire historical collection, and it will be DAT tapes and VHS and HD cam and QuickTime movies and. So we're always kind of keeping up to the top standard, but we also have to keep all the older models as well. And right now there's the possibility of a sort of a European standard being formed, or a European Commission that will give a suggestion for perhaps a European standard for archiving. But that's in development, and we'll see if that comes up in the next year or so. That could be quite interesting for everyone, I think. And of course, Netflix and the larger companies are also dictating the standards. And I think that perhaps a lot of the filmmakers in your audience are looking at those sort of high-end streaming standards as new delivery formats. And we are as well, that we might have to end up accepting those as well. That's fine. We'll figure out how to do it.
When we had a legal deposit running, until 2019, we had many issues, very high rate of disapproval of material that were not, it was quite far from standard. So it's something that we need to build up in Brazil, closer connection between the production and the heritage institutions. So it's really nice to hear about it. I do know it's not your department, but could you please say something about other documents connected to the movie itself, to the work that it's not audiovisual, like the poster, other materials? Do you also receive those?
Yes, we do. So certainly with new films, we ask for an entire electronic press kit, an EPK. So we would get the poster and stills and possibly a script and all the press material that goes with it, and more and more with digital films, there's more of that, because it's easier to re-edit an extra outtake or an extra interview with the producer. You know, it's easier to find all these extra parts. So all of those we do keep if they're sent to us, but we don't have the resources right now to do really great descriptions on all that extra, and so it's sort of kept in a block of extra. But posters certainly we keep separately, and those are registered separately. We have a whole department that is devoted to film-related material, and that's apparatus, equipment, posters, stills, beautiful glass negatives, all kinds of lovely old pre-cinema items. That's a great treasure. And I love to look at that stuff as well. Yeah.
Wonderful. You mentioned the brilliant biograph, and just to share with you, we had Cinemateca do Museu de Arte Moderna, Cinemateca do MAN do Rio de Janeiro. That's one leading cinemateca in Rio, and they presented this program of the brilliant biograph, and it was a great success. So it's not only in Shanghai that you can see the traveling films from I. We also had the pleasure to see that, but I do hope you have more programs.
It's so uncanny, isn't it, that films can run around the world. I mean, that's so wonderful that we're all stuck in our homes, but these films are zooming around. It's surprising how many places it got showed this year, and it is online too, so your viewers are able to see it, I believe, on the iFilm player. Yeah.
Super.
Yeah.
And you showed. Now switching to the FIAF Technical Commission, you showed us the translate version of the first digital statement that the National Archive did. I heard they're still proofreading, and they will launch to the Brazilian audience soon, and it's quite nice to have it. I think you're doing great at the Technical Commission with the digital statement, and it seems that they are also translating the other ones, and
Oh, that's great. That would be great. I think the ethics one is quite interesting also for perhaps people that aren't deeply involved in archives, because there is so much going on right now with digitally improving images. And it's so easy, and the tools are really getting powerful. And of course, that will connect right into probably what you'll talk to with Yvonne about sort of deep fakes and the way you can manipulate the truth in audiovisual material. And from an historical and archive perspective, that's a little bit, it's obviously really compelling and really fascinating, but it's also a little bit scary. Because one of the things that we want to be sure that we help people understand is how cinema heritage really looked as much as we can. And, you know, as restorers and archivists, that's always a problem, because even now we're projecting analog films as digital, and we're having this question, you know, is this really true to the nature of the film? But now there are it's so easy to kind of change the color, boost the stability, change the flicker. It's like a push of a button. And so we thought it was a good time to have this ethical statement to sort of help people remember to check that they're not drifting into this very seductive area of manipulation.
Indeed, it's a great document. Congrats on the whole
Thanks.
team it created. Yes,
I hope they'll translate it. That's nice that they might translate that one as well, because that would be really good. Yeah,
it seems so. We hope it's going to be soon. And could you please tell us a little bit about the minimal archiving? I know it's an ongoing project, but it's so relevant, I think, for many of us who deal with this. We are quite behind on dealing with digital in Brazil, and also it's funny. In Cineop we were in contact with this major streaming player, and I asked them, the delivery person, could you please tell us which production companies are doing a great job that we would like to ask them for a discussion at Cineop? And I heard back, oh, none of them are doing great. So, of course, one thing is digital archiving, another is delivery, but they are intertwined somehow. And we know that FIAF, it's a very expressive number, 75 institutions, 75 countries. But if we see they are not well distributed around the world. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the minimal archiving and other means to reach out other institutions that are not doing so great. and that's it. Thanks.
Well, it's been a very difficult assignment, you could say, for us. It's a little bit of a chicken egg situation, as you know. Sometimes we don't have the right information because we're not coming at it from the right point of view. I mean, I'm sitting in a well-funded archive trying to imagine what somebody who isn't in my position needs, and so we are trying to get to the people that need it, but they are also busy trying to deal with their own archives and don't have as much time maybe to work on it. We hope we are able to break it down into kind of three categories that need to be addressed. One is vault, sort of simple vault construction, and you know, if your collection isn't stable, if your collection has water running over it, if it's not dry and cold, if it's wet, if it's hot, then everything else almost doesn't matter. So it's about stabilizing the environment that it's in first and foremost. But here's the thing, you also have to have, and this is another part of the chicken egg, if nobody knows what your collection is, and nobody is passionate about it, and they haven't seen it, and it's totally invisible, then that also makes it die. So at the same time, we've realized as we research that not only do you have to stabilize your vault, but you also have to find some way to communicate about your collection. And so we've come up with this vault, minimum vault thing, but also this idea of having some sort of reference scanner, some sort of easy, low-cost scanner where you can just digitize your material enough that you can perhaps communicate to the wider world what treasures you have. And you can say, look, these are the kind of films we have. Please help us restore them, or realize that these are endangered. If no one can see that material, they can't even react in a good way about it. So unfortunately, all these things happen at once, and you know this perfectly well. So there's the whole digital side of it, the whole digital communication side, not digital preservation, but just simply the communication. There's the vault stability side, and then there's knowing what you have and being able to communicate about it and registering it in a way that you know that it's that you can talk about the changes that are happening. So you have to have enough documentation about the collection to say, this is what's happening to it. This is how many things we have. This is the type of things we have. And this is the change that's happening. So you need to have at least basic registration that says, last year we had 10,000 films and this year we only have 8,000 because they got flooded or they were stolen or there was a fire. If you don't know what you have, you can't say what's going on with it. So we're working on these three parts simultaneously: scanner, storage, information toolkit. So a basic information toolkit that will have how do you identify types of film, just simple registration suggestions, condition report suggestions, and that will all be sort of paper that someone can handle and understand how to create some forms that would be useful. I guess there's a fourth component, obviously, and this is the most difficult for a lot of people, and that's digital storage. So every country is also making a lot of brand new digital films, and those don't fall into these categories at all. So that's something I'm trying to research now, is what is cheap digital storage? It's not easy to find. One idea that seems to come up more and more often is partnering with a larger institution or somebody sympathetic and allowing them to have so you don't have to create your own management system, have a small portion of their system. And that most likely in many places might be a university, honestly. It might be some academic institution that's willing to give an archive a couple hundred terabytes or something to just start putting their material in. And then that allows the archive to not have to manage any of that digital system. So that's probably right now our best suggestion, is to find a partner. I have a dream that we can find a way within FIAF to partner the larger institutions that have digital storage with the smaller institutions that don't. And it's not very far down the line that people don't have digital storage set up, digital asset management systems. It's not pretty far advanced archives right now don't necessarily have it, because it takes a lot of work. You have to have an IT infrastructure and people to manage it. And it's quite a different set of people than most archives have on their staff. So it's a really difficult situation. A lot of us in FIAF are deeply concerned about digital films in the world and where they're being kept.
Yeah, and we've been noticing a recent shift, like a spotlight on institutions that don't have so much funding, and it's nice to see this concrete outcome out of it, of this whole new policy in a way. Or and I wonder if you could tell us what is the digital storage from FILMMUSEUM, just for us to have a picture of it. You showed some tape libraries, and how one digital asset is actually stored at
Sure. I mean, the easiest way to do, of course, is to just store on hard drives. And that's what we do sometimes temporarily, is we have the film on a hard drive, but then we're writing it into this tape robot. So basically LTO tapes. And those are...
Which generation? Sorry?
Now it's 6 and 7. But we started on 3, so we've done all of them. And as we copy over, of course, each LTO carries more information. So you sort of squeeze the tapes onto each other. And what's nice, I suppose, is that you don't have to throw away the old tapes. So at a certain point, we have a lot of copies of some of our older films because we have them on 4 and 6 and 7 maybe. And then we have 2 copies. So we make 2 copies of each film, each asset, whatever it is, and one stays in the robot and one goes somewhere else. So they're safely separated. But especially with the films that come in, they come in on a hard drive. And so we review them we review them, and then that hard drive we kind of imagine is like an original museum object. So we just put that as the sort of first copy on the shelf, and then it goes onto tapes after that. The tapes themselves are not super expensive. They're an okay way to store things. It's just that they're not easy to read unless you have a tape reader, and you have to have this whole management system around it. And that's the part that is expensive for most small archives. But it is possible. We just wrote a paper on this. We sort of did a study of all our film material that had come in on hard drives since 2008. And when we were ingesting it into the tape robot, when we finally got our tape robot in 2016, we had to read everything off of those hard drives again into the tape robot. And we found a very low failure rate on the hard drives. We had backed everything up. So we had everything on 2 or maybe 3 hard drives. And sometimes we had to go to that second or third copy. Sometimes. But we didn't lose data overall. So our unscientific conclusion was that it could be possible for an archive that didn't have a big asset management system to do what everyone said all along, which is lots of copies, keep stuff safe. That you could, just scale up small, start by copying your digital material on a couple of drives, give one to a trusted partner, and do that in a way to buy yourself time or whatever until you find a more sustainable solution. And it probably will be okay, because that's what we were really surprised to find, that those old drives were okay.
But in digital, the files itself, did you had any trouble with the codec or?
No, not really. The sort of basic files structures haven't changed so much. I mean, it was a lot of QuickTimes and a lot of WAV files for sound and DPXs. Those are all classics. So those are okay. The drives themselves, the worst things that happened to the drives themselves were that people dropped them, or that humans made mistakes, like copied a file or wrote over a file. So those were the things that happened. But that's actually probably good advice to everyone in the audience, as well as filmmakers and everyone, is just make copies of all your material.
And you also have the backup tapes of Joaquim Pedro de Andrade restoration project, and it's the project was carried away 10 years ago. 15 years ago, and now you have the backup. And since we cannot reach out Cinemateca Brasileira files, and then maybe you have a master at your hands. It's how this happened.
I had to look before I came on. I had to look and see what the history of that project was, and it was that his daughter had made those copies in France, and wrote to us and said, before we send these back to Brazil, would you like a copy? And I think we said, yes, we'll take a copy before before they're sent back to Brazil. So it was a little bit of foresight by, you could say, the maker, the owners of the project. But I think that it speaks to this idea that it's not bad to have multiple copies around the world, obviously. And that's the interesting thing about digital material, is that it's possible, and it's certainly not as expensive as having multiple copies of films. So it's something that I think filmmakers and producers can start thinking about more with their material.
Nice. I would like to ask just one quick question, and then you can share your final thought with us. You mentioned the agreement with film funds, but I wonder if you accept also independent production movies, in if you are open to any sort of Dutch production.
Yes, we do. And in fact, of course, within the landscape of Dutch filmmaking, our curators are always looking for the other films that got missed because we didn't get them through the sort of net of film funds. But I, as an unusual national archive, in that it isn't just a national archive, we look at all kinds of international films as well. So the curators are always looking at other filmmakers and other types of films to get into the collection. And as I said, the only limit is the amount of staff and registration time we have. But we have broad tastes, I guess I could say. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's great. That's quite a lesson for us, and it was so inspiring to hear the work you're doing at the FILMMUSEUM, also the Fiaf Technical Commission. So if you would like to share some final thoughts or issues.
Thank you for having me. It's been an interesting conversation. Thanks for the good questions. I'm sure we could talk more and deeper about many of these topics, of course. I hope it was a good start to the conversation. And yeah, we'll be in touch more, I think. I invite everyone to Amsterdam, to the Eye.
Yeah, I do hope they join you, because it's such an amazing institution. I'm going to say some final words in Portuguese. So, thank you and so much. Agradecemos a nossa convidada Anne Gant e a vocês que nos assistiram. Acompanhe e participe gratuitamente da programação da 16ª Cineop, que acontece no site cineop.com.br até o dia 28 de junho. Obrigada pela participação e até a próxima.